that actually produce another wide space for those SME-based lending platform to actually get started. Those are the, you look at on a parallel basis, you can see that comparably, China is still way behind on consumer lending, mortgage, and also in the fixed income and cash-based products. So are still very, very small, very big, and most alternative very small. Essentially, what we are trying to say is if you think about the consumer, which is the biggest groups, and the household, on the asset side, on the liability side, both are very inefficiently organized. That's where the opportunity is. So that's where those people can leverage really on both the asset side and liability side to leverage the sort of the technology to say, okay, where areas I can disintermediate the agents, somewhere I can re-aggregate agents, I can repackage the supply chain and the value chain in a different manner so that it can be more efficient in providing relevant products. Those are, if you look at their number of VC-based financing, and China is quickly catching up almost to be as big as the US in those VC-based financing. And those are a number of the examples of getting financing, and there's so much venture capital money that also get into this space. Well, we also invested at Hillhouse a number of companies who are leveraging the technology, such as big data applications. One of them company we call Bairong, which is Bairong and Baifundian. Essentially, both companies trying to say, instead of doing everything starting from scratch, they are trying to be the enabler to the traditional financial institutions to help them to be more efficient. For example, in Baifundian's case, essentially trying to build a credit bureau businesses for those online, for people to connect, commercial banks to connect with each other so that they can leverage each other's data to be more relevant, more precise in giving consumer credit. And in Bairong's case, that they stayed in with the commercial organizations and helping them to be more targeted and more efficient in offering products. And there's a number of technology from pre-marketing to target to the relevant products and getting relevant demand profile to application to ID, where it's face recognition, anti-fraud, credit verification, client relationship management, CRM, collection, resale, fulfillment, and as well as risk management. So you look at the whole value chain, what I'm trying to say is the opportunity set opens up to students for careers. There's just a lot more than purely say, I'm only doing finance or I'm only a technology student. You can be open to so many areas. The idea is to have a cohesive interdisciplinary study, so important. I'm gonna address that a little bit later. Actually, I'm writing a little bit my note on this. I actually gonna talk to you guys about what I think about the career is that the students should not give up by thinking, oh, I'm not in technology space. I'm not in the financial services space, and that's not my major. Actually, you don't have to be either of those majors, but what you should do is to be much more interdisciplinary, as we can tell all those opportunity sets open up in a much wider range as the technology start to combine all those opportunities together. In addition to the core value chain, there's also general functions from admin to marketing, distribution, and insurance we talked about earlier, and what happened in China, and also asset management and AI, and how changing the asset management, so-called robot advisors, so that to be more cost efficient to produce relevant products for consumers. Those examples of the China's robot advisors, and is that we'll talk about how the blockchain can reorganize the value chain from the how IoT supply chain ID management verification can be much more efficient with the blockchain technology and standards. Essentially, the decentralization drives much more about a P2P maintenance instead of a centralized clearing system. And the distributed system also makes the traceability much better instead of saying you're counting on one person or one body to make that verification. So it's much easier to do that with distributed systems. I thought I'm gonna stop here, and so coming back to the question about career opportunities. What are the development and career opportunities in internet finance? If you really think about the opportunity set and how we get here in innovation in financial services industry, that it's not just about information game, as I said earlier, because the information game can add so much value that we already all know. It's about you have to change the whole value chain to be more relevant to your clients. They can be customers, consumer customers, or business customers. How do we do that? I think it's just very simple. It's just back to basics, B2B. In the end, it's a B2B. So I think what happens is, I used to. I'm not a technology student. I actually know very little about technology per se, but I actually think that by having a general education in university, have exposure for you to various sectors, various technology, all the innovations that you have is important. But more important than that, actually, is the capacity, the ability to ask very basic questions. And I remember when I first invested in a company like Baidu very early on, when I just started. My first time with Robin Li, I just asked him. He was surprised. I knew nothing about technology. I asked him why people search. It's a very basic question. Why people search? Why people use Google? Why people use Baidu? Sounds easy question, but when you really think a lot harder about that question, it's not that easy, because you really need to understand the demand infrastructure of people. Essentially, once people satisfy the basic demand, of food and sex. What else people want to satisfy the basic demand? It's about second level of the demand is about safety, and the ability to say I know something. So the search is actually very basic demand, connecting from unknown to known. So it makes you feel safe. So once you understand that, you actually can design products much more relevant to consumer needs than just say, okay, it's an information. That's the reason why we are seeing Asia-oriented search company. Doesn't matter if it's Naver or Baidu or Tencent doing essentially, or Alibaba essentially is a product search company, all much more innovative than purely algorithm-based Western search company. So I'm just saying that using those examples to say for every student, what I believe is really about capacity. As we know more and more, we have more and more information. Do we lose the basic sense of asking basic questions? I think a lot of that you ask yourself, we may have lost our basic instinct of asking the most basic questions. Why we do this and why we do that and what that means. So my first advice to students is to have that critical thinking and ask basic questions, because the business model in the end have to be back to basics. Not about the fancy, not about those new concepts and fancy ideas. It's about going back to the basics. So keep that critical thinking, keep the capacity to ask basic questions. I think is where you can propel your career. I don't have any technology training. I invested in a number of technology companies in China, Baidu, Tencent, and all those JD, all those companies in the US, Uber, Airbnb, and all those companies that well knowing very little about technology, because I always start my conversation with those entrepreneurs about very basic questions. Sometimes those questions can surprise them. I really believe that as students, I did that when I was a student, actually. I was a graduate school student. I didn't have any money. By the way, I couldn't find a job in the traditional financial service industry. So I had to work hard to ask basic questions, because actually I didn't get through the interview process of traditional financial service industry. They kind of dinged me in the second round interview because I asked 2 stupid questions. But I ended up, by asking those questions to be more relevant, actually gain a bigger audience in the innovation space. So I would say my first advice is to be really focusing on, the ability to ask basic questions. Don't get yourself too much into the necessarily say, because I know this information, so I know the answer. Don't be a victim of your own success, victim of the knowledge of the success. That's my first advice, and also the innovation. I wanted to sort of address a little bit on innovation. I think there's a little bit, I would say, alarming sense of the implications of innovation, in the sense that technology and innovation starting to be much more about disfranchising, make the income gap even wider, make the top 1% even better off, which is fine, because that's the nature of innovation, because a winner takes all nature. But I would say I would love, when we have innovation, I would love innovation to be more inclusive. Innovation not only be the disfranchising forces, but also it to be an equalizer. The equalizer could bring in more people into the sort of better wealth creation together. I think that's, so in a way, I'm, part of our AI fund gonna be also to focusing on sort of innovation to be an equalizer, or in Chinese words, we can say, 创新要有人文情怀. So how do we think about that? So we're actually looking at a couple of companies that are doing that. They are essentially saying that instead of making the 1% even smarter, they are trying to say, why don't we help the bottom 10% to be a little bit closer to the mean? So there's a number of technology companies we're investing is doing that, exactly the case. So that way, you actually help bring more people to be on the similar level. I would say students today have that luxury to look at companies to find examples that you think could be more, sort of true to your heart, on your passion, where you think that you could have added value to society in addition to make a successful career. With that, I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer a couple questions.
Thank you, Mr. Zhang. Now we have come to the Q&A session. So you guys feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions for Mr. Zhang. Yes, this gentleman in the blue shirt.
Hi, can I ask a question about mobile?
Sure, mobile? Mobile.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
that over here. Yeah. I think OFO and mobile is a really popular topic back in mainland, but probably not popular here. But I have a question that is, I think it needs a lot of fixed investment in buying new bicycles in this kind of companies. And what's the key success factor using your language, or what kind of improvements do we need to make these kind of companies to make profit and to have a positive free cash flow?
for the benefits of the audience, maybe you could explain to them what
Okay,
mobile
sure.
and Mobac is. They may not know.
So in mainland China, OFO and Mobac are two major players in the renting bicycle market. So it's actually, they provide bicycles for rent, and in campus and on the street, you can rent it like for 1 RMB for about 1 hour. And it has two kinds of different payment methods, but the basic mindset is you borrow a bicycle from these two companies, so that people don't need to carry their own bicycles every day. I'll put it in another way, probably in a foreseeable future, if the profit cannot have a turnaround, what kind of rationale, or say, what kind of story these company have that could make the company at this high level of evaluation?
What do you think? Take a guess. What do you think?
Yeah, last week I was in Peking University, and I saw Mobac has entered into Peking University, which is the founder place of the OFO, and because I think the rent price is really cheap, and probably now at this stage, people just want to enlarge the scale and to defeat the another. And when they occupy the market, probably they can do more things, just like Didi and Kuaidi.
This is good. This is, should be class like. You describe the question and you answer the question. So
what's your answer?
Well, I'm not sure I necessarily can answer your question, but I wanted to actually use this. I think this is actually a great example. I wanted to use this example to illustrate, as I said earlier.